You hear about it on TV or from a buddy over beers, shaking his head saying, "Man, she just wasn't who I thought she was." And you nod. You feel bad for him. Maybe even offer some advice, like you know something about marriage. But deep down, you think, nah, not me, not us. We've been married 20 years. 20? That's 2 decades of morning coffee together, late night talks, holiday traditions, kids' soccer games, road trips where she'd sing along to country songs while I pretended to hate them but secretly liked it. We'd built a life. Not perfect, nothing ever is but solid. We raised 2 kids who'd grown into good people. Our daughter had already moved out, chasing her own dreams, and our son was away at college. The house was quieter, but it felt earned, like we'd made it through the hardest parts and could finally just enjoy each other again. You know what I mean? I'd look at her sometimes when she was curled up on the couch, reading a book, and think, yeah, this is it. This is what people mean when they talk about home. I trusted her completely, with everything. And then, I started noticing little things. It wasn't anything big. Not at first. The kind of stuff you could explain away if you wanted to. A new perfume that I didn't recognize. More time at the office. Big project. Deadlines. That kind of thing. Her phone always flipped face down on the table, like she didn't want notifications lighting up where I could see. Smiling at texts, but tucking the screen away when I walked into the room. It was subtle. But when you've lived with someone for 20 years, you know their rhythms. And these weren't her rhythms anymore. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still told me she loved me at night, still asked if I wanted another beer while we watched the game. But the warmth wasn't the same. Her laugh didn't reach her eyes anymore. She'd hug me, but it felt lighter, like her mind was somewhere else. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that it was just the kids being gone, the house being quiet, maybe she was just stressed. But something in my gut wouldn't shut up. One night, as I watched her pour herself a glass of wine and scroll through her phone, smiling at whatever was on the screen, I caught myself thinking, who is she smiling at? That's when it started. The doubt. You never think it'll happen to you, until it does. And then you can't unsee it. You can't unfeel that shift, even if you want to. At first, it was just little things. You know, the kind of things you'd never even notice if you weren't paying attention. Her phone. She used to leave it lying around, face up. Half the time the screen would light up with messages from the kids, her sister, some recipe she found online. But lately, always face down, always within reach, always locked. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Then there were the late nights at work. Now, she did have a demanding job, I'll give her that. She'd been in real estate for years, and I knew clients could be needy and unpredictable. But suddenly, she was working later than I'd ever seen her before. 2, 3 nights a week, she'd come in after 9 p.m., tossing her keys on the counter, muttering something about how brutal the market was. And she'd go straight to the shower before even saying more than a quick, "Hey." I asked her once if everything was okay, if she was too stressed, if she needed me to help more around the house, and she just smiled at me and said, "Oh, it's fine, just a busy season." But it wasn't fine. And it wasn't just a season. Then came the girls' nights. That one really threw me, because she'd never been much of a girls' night out kind of woman. Sure, she had a few close friends, but they were more of the yoga and brunch type. But all of a sudden, she's heading out on Fridays in heels and lipstick, saying the girls needed to blow off steam. She'd leave at 7 and not come back until after midnight, sometimes closer to 1 in the morning. And she always came back happy, but not with me. I remember one night, sitting on the couch half asleep, waiting for her to get home. She walked through the door, looking like she'd just won the lottery, flushed cheeks, big smile, glowing. She kicked off her shoes, tossed her bag on the chair, and said, "Sorry I'm late, we lost track of time." Then she kissed me lightly on the head, not the lips, and walked past me to the bedroom. That was the moment I felt it in my gut. That was the moment I realized she was happy, but I had nothing to do with it. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. You think back to all the promises you made to each other, how you both said you'd never be like those people. You know, the couples who betray each other, lie, sneak around. We swore we'd never let it happen to us. And yet, here we were. I told myself, nah, it's probably nothing. You're overthinking. She loves you. She'd never do that to you. Not her. But my gut wasn't buying it anymore. You know what's funny? I should have seen it coming, because I'd lived this before. When I was a kid, maybe 14, my parents' marriage blew up right in front of me. At the time, I didn't understand everything. But now I see it clear as day. My dad worked construction. Long hours, hands like sandpaper, boots always caked in dust. He was a quiet guy, not much for words, but he showed up, always. My mom? She was different. She liked to dress up, go out, always seemed to be chasing something just out of reach. At first, it was just whispers. My dad coming home early one afternoon and finding another car in the driveway. He didn't say anything to me not right away, but that night I heard yelling through the walls, things breaking, doors slamming, and then silence. Next thing I knew, he was packing a bag and sleeping at my uncle's place. Years later, when I was old enough to really understand, he told me what happened. Said he came home early to surprise her, walked in through the back door, went upstairs, and found her in bed with some guy. In their bed. I'll never forget the way he said it. He just shook his head, stared down at his hands, and muttered, "She wasn't even sorry, son. She just looked at me like I was the problem." I remember sitting there, feeling this cold anger in my chest, and I promised myself, right then and there, that will never be me. I swore I'd never be the fool, never the guy who didn't see it coming, never the man standing in his own house feeling like a stranger. But here I was, feeling all the same things he must have felt. The late nights, the excuses, the way she smiled at someone who wasn't me, and I realized, damn, I'd become my father. Everything I said I'd never be, I was. And that hurt more than I expected. At some point, I couldn't keep it all in anymore. One night after work, I stopped by the bar near my office, sat at the counter, ordered a bourbon, and texted my buddy Dave to come meet me. We've been friends since high school, been through some stuff together. The kind of guy who'll show up at 2 a.m. if you need him, but also the kind of guy who thinks everything can be solved with a joke and another round. When he walked in, he clapped me on the back and said, "Man, you look like hell. What's going on?" I stared into my glass for a second, then just said it. "I think Kylie's cheating on me." He froze. Then, just like I expected, he laughed. Not cruel, just that nervous laugh guys do when they don't know what to say. "Oh, come on," he chuckled. "Buddy, she adores you. Always has. Everyone can see it. She still looks at you like you hung the damn moon." I didn't laugh. Didn't even crack a smile. Just shook my head. "She used to," I said quietly. "But lately, no, that look's gone." Dave's grin faded. He ordered himself a beer and leaned in closer. "What do you mean? What's going on?" I took a long breath and told him everything. The late nights at work, the phone face down, the new perfume, the girls' nights, the way she came home looking happier than she ever did with me, and those text messages. God, those text messages. I'd catch her glancing at her phone with that little smirk, not the kind of smile you give your sister or your friend from college, the kind that hits different. And when she noticed me watching, she'd lock the screen and mutter something like, "Oh, it's just Jen being ridiculous again." But Jen didn't make her cheeks flush like that. Dave sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "You sure, man? You sure you're not just reading into stuff? Maybe you're stressed overthinking." "No," I cut him off. "I know her. I know what she looks like when she's happy. And she's happy, just not with me." We sat there in silence for a while. The hum of the bar, clinking glasses, faint laughter in the background. Finally, Dave said, "So what are you gonna do? You gonna confront her?" I shook my head. "No, not yet. Not until I'm sure. I'm not gonna be the guy who accuses his wife without proof and then looks like a jealous idiot when she explains it all away." He nodded slowly. "Smart," he said, "but be careful, man. Once you open that box, there's no putting it back." I finished my drink, tossed some bills on the bar, and stood up. "I know," I said, "but I can't just sit here and do nothing either." On the drive home, I made up my mind. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't demand answers just yet. I'd watch. I'd wait. And when the truth finally showed itself, I'd be ready. Because one thing I learned from my dad, if you're going to catch someone in a lie, you better make damn sure you've got the facts first. I didn't sleep much after that night with Dave. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her smiling at that damn phone, laughing at something I wasn't part of. So the next morning, I made a decision. One I never thought I'd make in my life. I called a private investigator. It felt dirty, you know? like I was crossing some line that decent husbands weren't supposed to cross. But at that point, I already knew something was wrong. I just needed someone else to confirm it. The guy came recommended by a lawyer friend, ex-cop, quiet, professional. He met me at a little diner on the edge of town, wearing a worn leather jacket and a calm, tired smile. I told him everything over coffee. He just nodded along, like he'd heard it all before. When I finished, he set his cup down and said, "I'll find out. Don't worry. You'll know soon enough." And he did. Didn't even take long. A week later, I got a call. "Got what you asked for. When can you meet?" We sat in his car in a dark parking lot, and he handed me an envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. I opened it. There she was, my wife, in a short black dress, hair done up, stepping into some hotel downtown with a man I'd never seen before. Different nights, different outfits, but always the same guy. Same hotel, same story. Another photo, her sitting in his car, leaning close, laughing, touching his arm. Another, them walking out of a restaurant, her head on his shoulder. I stared at those pictures for a long time. Didn't even realize my hands were shaking until the PI said softly, "You okay?" I nodded, even managed to smile a little. Yeah, I lied. But the truth? Something broke in me that night. Not anger, not yet. Just this heavy sadness. Like watching someone you love slowly turn into a stranger right in front of you. I thanked the PI, paid him, and drove home. Didn't even turn on the radio. When I got home, she was already asleep or pretending to be curled up on her side of the bed. I lay down next to her, staring at the ceiling, clutching that envelope like it was full of knives. I still loved her, but it wasn't the same anymore. It was a different kind of love now. A quieter, colder kind. The kind that knows it's already over, but hasn't said it out loud yet. It was a Friday, just like any other. I wrapped up work a little early, grabbed a six-pack on the way home, thinking maybe stupidly, maybe we'd order takeout, watch a movie, pretend we were still us for one more night. But when I opened the door, I froze. There she was, standing by the mirror in the hallway, adjusting an earring, wearing a little black dress I'd never seen before, hair curled, lipstick perfect, heels clicking against the hardwood. She looked stunning, but not for me. She jumped a little when she saw me. "Oh, you're home," she said, like that was some kind of inconvenience. I set the beer down on the counter, leaned against the doorway, and just watched her. For a second, I almost laughed. The scene was so cliché, it hurt. Wife in her best dress, husband in his work boots, quiet kitchen, air thick with everything unspoken. Finally, I asked calm as I could, "So, where you headed?" She froze, just for half a second, then forced a smile, fiddling with her clutch. "A work thing. Dinner with some clients. Nothing big." "Clients," I repeated. She nodded too fast. "Yeah, just a quick dinner. Won't be late." I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Every muscle in my body wanted to shake her, to scream, to throw those damn pictures in her face. But I didn't. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching her lie to me like she'd practiced it 1,000 times in front of that same mirror. And in that moment, I knew. This was it. The end. No more doubts. No more pretending. No more excuses. Whatever we'd been, it was already gone. She glanced at me, waiting for me to say something, maybe even hoping I'd stop her. But I didn't. I just gave her a tight little smile, nodded toward the door, and said, "Well, don't let me keep you." Her eyes flickered guilt, annoyance. I couldn't even tell anymore, and she slipped past me without another word. The door shut behind her, and I stood there in the quiet, staring at that mirror, wondering how long she'd been walking out of my life before I finally noticed. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there for a moment, just me, the silence, and the faint smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. Then, I moved. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I'd been planning this for weeks. Ever since I got that envelope from the detective, I knew this day was coming. And now it was here. I walked to the bedroom, pulled the old suitcase from the closet, the one she never touched, and laid it on the bed. I didn't bother with much. A couple pairs of jeans, shirts, my shaving kit, a few photos of the kids. Everything else didn't matter. Next stop was the safe. I took out the folder of documents I'd quietly put together: bank statements, account numbers, the deed to the house. I already knew what I needed to do. I logged onto my laptop, sat at the kitchen table, and started working. First, transferred every dime from our joint account into my personal account. Left just enough for her to cover a month of bills. Second, paid off the credit card. Closed it. Cut it in half right there on the counter. Third, paid off the car loan, canceled a couple subscriptions in my name she'd been using. It was all done in under an hour. Funny how fast you can dismantle 20 years when you've been preparing long enough. I grabbed my wedding ring, slipped it off, and stared at it for a long time. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was full of everything we used to be, and everything we weren't anymore. I set it down on the coffee table, right on top of the envelope of photos. Then I wrote the note, just a few lines. Kylie, you made your choice. Now I'm making mine. The kids know how to reach me. Don't bother calling. There's nothing left to say. I placed it next to the ring. One last glance around the house, our house, and I walked out. I didn't slam the door, didn't lock it behind me, just left. Drove out of the neighborhood with the windows down, the cool night air washing over me like a quiet kind of freedom. No destination, yet just away. By the time she came home from her little work dinner, I'd already be halfway to another city. Phone turned off. Life packed into a suitcase and a tank of gas. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt alive again. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel 2 towns over. The air smelled like stale coffee and old carpet, but for some reason, I breathed easier than I had in months. I drove the next couple of days. No real plan, just putting miles between me and everything I'd left behind. Finally ended up in a small city a few hours away. Not too far, but far enough she wouldn't find me unless I wanted her to. First thing I did was get myself an apartment. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. Clean. Quiet. Just enough room for me and a fresh start. Next, I called a friend at the company's regional office here. Told him I was looking to transfer. By the end of the week, I had a desk, a new team, and a paycheck coming in. It felt strange. Waking up in a place that didn't smell like her perfume. Coming home to an empty kitchen instead of seeing her on the couch. Some nights, I'd catch myself staring at my phone, half expecting a text from her saying, "Come home," but it never came. And honestly, that was for the best. The kids knew where I was. That was the one thing I refused to leave behind. I called them both the first night in my apartment, sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and told them everything. Not in detail, I didn't need to drag them through it, but enough so they understood. My daughter cried. My son cursed. And then they both said the same thing. "We're with you, Dad. Always." That meant more than I could say. We talked every couple days after that. Sometimes about school, sometimes about work, sometimes just to hear each other's voices. They never once told me to go back. Never asked me to forgive what she'd done. They just stayed on my side. And that kept me going. It wasn't easy, starting over at 45. There were nights it hit me hard, sitting alone at a kitchen table, eating takeout, wondering how the hell I ended up here. But even then, underneath the ache, I felt something else too. Relief. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. Didn't feel like I had to compete for her attention. Didn't feel invisible. It was just me now. My life. My choices. And that felt like freedom. It happened on a random Tuesday. I was at the grocery store, pushing a cart, half asleep, just trying to remember if I needed milk or bread. I turned into an aisle, and that's when it happened. We both reached for the same jar of pasta sauce at the exact same time. Our hands bumped. We both froze, then looked up at each other. And there she was. Jennifer. I didn't know her name yet, of course. But I'll never forget that first look. She had these deep blue eyes, kind, but tired, like someone who'd seen enough heartbreak to last a lifetime, but still believed people could be good. And for a second, we both just stood there, staring. I chuckled awkwardly. "Sorry, you go ahead," I said. She smiled a little shy, a little sad, and said, No, you first." Something about that smile hit me right in the chest. We started talking. Just small talk at first, something about the weather, how crowded the store was. But then she said, "You look like you've had a long day." I laughed. "You have no idea." And she tilted her head, like she did have an idea. We ended up walking to the checkout together, still talking. Before I could lose my nerve, I blurted out, "Listen, I know this is forward, but would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" She looked at me for a long second, then smiled again, a real one this time, and said, "I'd like that." We met at a little cafe 2 days later, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. We sat there for hours, talking about everything and nothing. She told me she was a kindergarten teacher, loved to cook, didn't have kids of her own, but always wanted to. I told her enough about me to be honest, that I'd just come out of a bad marriage, that I was still figuring things out. She nodded, didn't flinch, didn't judge, just said softly, "I get it. I've been there too." We both laughed about how rusty we felt like two teenagers on their very first date, unsure what to say or where to put our hands. When it was time to leave, she touched my arm and said, "Call me, okay?" And I did. Every day. Slowly, carefully, we started seeing each other more. Dinners turned into weekends. Weekends turned into plans. And somewhere along the way, that quiet little spark I thought was gone forever, it came back. With her. It took a year. A full year of paperwork, hearings, signatures, and waiting. But one morning, an envelope came in the mail. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Stamped. Signed. Official. My divorce was final. I stood there in my little kitchen, holding that paper, staring at it. And instead of feeling sad, I felt free. It was over. That chapter of my life, the lies, the doubt, the cold silence in my own home finally closed. That night, I called Jennifer and told her. She just whispered, "About time?" And then she laughed, that beautiful laugh that always seemed to fill up the whole room. I didn't waste another second. The next weekend, we drove to the beach where we'd shared one of our first dates, just the two of us. I got down on one knee in the sand and asked her to marry me. She didn't even let me finish the question before she said yes. We got married 6 months later. Simple ceremony. Close friends, family, my kids standing right there beside me. Jennifer wore a soft white dress, and when she walked toward me, she was glowing. And me? I couldn't stop smiling. We've built a whole new life since then. Bought a house together. She became a stepmom to my kids, and they adore her. We even started our own family, something I never thought I'd get to experience again. There are still moments when I think back to what happened. The pain, the betrayal, the nights I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. And then I look at Jennifer, at our home, at the life we've made, and I know I made the right choice. I walked away when I needed to. I held on to my dignity, and I found my happiness on the other side. I don't regret a thing, not a damn thing. I left, saved myself, and found something even better. I found her.